this South African farmer bull, which is the most blatantly obvious racist ever. It is blatantly obvious the way that we treat white South Africans, who, by the way, for the most part, and I am generalizing here, some of the wealthiest people are well-to-do people in the country. They speak their language. They own most of the land and the property. And somehow they're being granted a fast track to become Americans while they're trying to cut down on immigration from other countries. You know, you get that from where? From the brown people.
Don Lemon is saying what we're all thinking about Donald Trump's decision to offer expedited refugee status for a group of white landowning farmers from South Africa, known as Afrikaners, who dominated South African politics and society for centuries before the end of apartheid in the 90s. Afrikaners weren't victims of oppression, they were the enforcers of it. During apartheid, land was systemically taken from black South Africans, handed to white settlers, especially Afrikaners, through brutal laws, mass force removals, and state violence. Entire black communities were uprooted and dumped into barren homelands, while white farmers were gifted the fertile land and backed with heavy government subsidies. And now Trump wants to play savior to them. He didn't offer this kind of refuge to Haitian migrants. He didn't offer it to asylum seekers from Gaza or Sudan. But for white South Africans who once benefited from apartheid, suddenly he's compassionate. This isn't policy, it's ideology, steeped in race, like always.
White South Africans, about 9% of the population, owned 87% of the fertile land. Okay? Today, black South Africans make up more than 90% of the population, and they only hold about 4% of all privately owned land. So what they're trying to do is say, hey, we need to fix an historical injustice and figure out if you're not using that land to farm, then we need to have some of that land, not taking all of your entire farm. That's not what's happening. And we need to what? There needs to be equity. And now people are crying because the playing field is being leveled. And so therefore it is now discrimination.
You know the saying, equality always feels like oppression when you're used to the privileges born out of said oppression. And we're seeing that play out right in front of our eyes. Because when people who've always had the power start losing even a fraction of it, they don't feel balanced, they feel threatened. That's the context behind what's happening here. This isn't about human rights. This is about maintaining white dominance at all costs. And just like that, equality gets rebranded as genocide by people who've never known what actual oppression looks like. Let's talk about Elon Musk's tweet and Donald Trump's post. Musk said there is a major political party in South Africa that is actively promoting white genocide. A whole arena chanting about killing white people. Starlink can't get a license because I'm not black. And Trump followed with, South Africa is confiscating land, human rights violation. Well, this is pure great replacement fear-mongering. There is no white genocide happening in South Africa. What's happening is land reform in a country still reckoning with centuries of apartheid and stolen land. The new law targets abandoned or unused land, not people based on race. But for Trump and Musk, facts don't matter. They're selling white panic to their base, and the base is buying it.
The law is about due process. Since the resolution in the ANC in 2017 to 2024 has been an extensive constitutional amendment to ensure that there is no injustice, that food security is never threatened, that firstly, state land is available for those who have been dispossessed of their land, black people, followed by underutilized land, and followed finally by properly expropriated private land. They know that there is no land confiscation. They know that 30 years later, this is the most benign land reform act that has come in. They know that Afrikaners and whites own 70% of the land to this day and all the farms, mostly in South Africa. So they know the truth of the situation. Even the far right-wing white Afrikaner organizations have spent the weekend distancing themselves, saying, oh, we did complain to Trump, but we didn't expect this.
It does not provide for confiscation of land. What it does is it allows for a legal process reviewable by courts by which the state may compulsorily acquire property for certain purposes, including to restore that property to people from whom it was unfairly and unjustly taken in the past. In fact, it's the right of eminent domain. It's the same right that's enshrined in the American Constitution in the Fifth Amendment. In fact, it's quite a standard practice around the world that states have a right of eminent domain. What's striking here is that a legal process and a democratic state has established this right in law in South Africa. It is comparable to similar legislation around the world, and it has not yet been used.
As you just heard, South Africa U.S. Ambassador Abraham Rasool and Professor Ruth Hall explain the new law passed in South Africa through not perfect means, but it is a step towards reckoning the remnants of centuries of colonialism and the apartheid system. Under apartheid, Black South Africans were forcibly removed from their homes, relocated to underdeveloped, barren Bantustans, while white South Africans, including Afrikaners, took over their land. The 1913 Natives Land Act restricted Black people to just 7% of the land. The Group Areas Act then bulldozed entire neighborhoods like Sophiatown to make way for whites-only suburbs. So now this law isn't about discrimination. It's about an attempt to long overdue repair. Trump calling it racist, that's not leadership. That's projection.
Why are you creating an expedited path into the country for Afrikaners but not others?
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. It's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about.
Trump now wants to grant expedited refugee status to 59 white South Africans while calling their situation a genocide. Let's be clear, when Gaza is burning, when Sudan is starving, this is what he calls genocide? Not war, not famine, but a decline in white property dominance? Afrikaners once controlled nearly every aspect of South African society. Land, labor, law. They gained that land through state-sanctioned theft, forced relocation, military-backed evictions. And now, when some of that imbalance is being addressed, Donald Trump frames it as persecution. The fact that he calls that genocide is not just offensive, it's dangerous.
The administration also canceled temporary refugee status for as many as 14,000 Afghans already in the U.S., including many who served alongside the U.S. in the war. All face persecution from the Taliban if they are forced to go back. The welcome for white South Africans also in sharp contrast to another executive order the president signed the day he took office, suspending new refugee admissions for everyone else, including Black Sudanese escaping genocide and Latin Americans fleeing violent gangs.
And no one should be surprised. The hypocrisy is baked in. Trump and Elon Musk have both shown us who they are. Musk's white victimhood complex goes back to apartheid, the era in South Africa where he benefited from systemic racism. Trump's political brand has always centered whiteness, starting with birtherism and now framing land reform as anti-white violence. They are not confused. They are consistent, consistently racist, and consistently reckless.
The rich continue to get richer and the poor get poorer. Most of the farmland, more than 70% of it is owned by white farmers. So basically, they're sitting pretty. They've got nothing to complain about. Perhaps, Amy, there's a saying, the guilty are afraid. Perhaps they know that this unjust situation where a tiny minority enjoys, most of the country's wealth and resources is not tenable. And sooner or later, it will have to end.
Musk himself, who was born in South Africa and lived there, went to high school there until he was 18 and then moves to Canada. You got Peter Thiel, who was a co-founder with Musk of PayPal. Thiel was born in Germany, but brought to South Africa as a young child. He went to school in Swakopmund, which was notorious as probably the last place on the planet where people still openly greeted each other with Heil Hitler and celebrated Hitler's birthday. He went to a German school there before moving to the United States when he was 10 or 11. You've got David Sachs, who was born in Cape Town. He's big in PayPal and is now Trump's AI and crypto czar. You've got Roelof Botha, who was the son of Pick Butcher, the grandson of Pick Butcher, the last foreign minister of apartheid South Africa. He was the acceptable face of apartheid. You'll remember he used to run around the United States trying to put a gloss on how they were reforming things and that everything was getting better, which apparently it wasn't. But so you see those four key people at the top of PayPal, and they all have this, very intimate connection to South Africa.
And what makes this worse? The money behind it. Let's connect the dots, shall we? Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, the PayPal mafia, all men with deep South African ties and deeper bank accounts. They didn't just bring apartheid privilege to Silicon Valley, they monetized it. And now Trump is offering them political cover, welcoming white South African refugees while ignoring actual humanitarian crisis. This isn't immigration reform, it's a favor for wealthy and well-connected people. A message that as long as you're white and elite, there's always a place for you in Donald Trump's America.